So this is the problem. When you want to type a value into a particular cell in your macro, you cannot be sure that you're in the right place, the place you expect to be when you're punching into that cell. So for instance, if we want to just type my name into cell C5, then we can see this command here which says cells 3 down, 5 across, dot value is Adam. And as it says here, you may be able to do that the first time around the macro, and it might be great. But what happens if someone else, in particular if somebody else is using your macro? This is always the problem. And when they run the macro, they run from another sheet or from another workbook, because of course you can call macros from different workbooks and different sheets. Or when you first wrote the macro, it worked, but later on, because macros have a life of their own really, later on you decided to embellish the macro and you put a few more lines in earlier on in the macro, and now it's no longer the case that that particular sheet that you thought you were going to be in is active. A different sheet is now active, so you're going to punch onto the wrong sheet. Or what happens if the name of the sheet has changed? So you've said I want to punch to a particular sheet name, but the sheet name has changed, or the workbook name has changed, or someone's inserted columns or extra lines. All of these things are going to be causing you problems. I mean, you're going to be punching into a cell where you don't want to be punching into. Well, the solution is to make sure that you punch into the right place by capturing a name of the place that you want to punch into. So, for instance, setting those names when the macro first starts to run, and then the macro will remember all the way through what that particular sheet is called. There's also a very useful name that Excel has, which is this workbook, and this workbook will be the workbook that the macro is written in. So that can sometimes help you punch into the right workbook. Be careful that you don't. Be careful over that, because it's the macro that it's the spreadsheet that the macro is written in, not spreadsheets that the macro is called from. So, for instance, when you first start your macro, you could use this set command. We saw set being used earlier in a previous video. So you can set this variable starting sheet and set that as the active sheet. The active sheet will be the sheet that the macro is called from, because that's the one that's active when the macro is called. The sheet is the tab, by the way, and you can also set a variable starting workbook, for instance. You can call it what you like, and that will be the active workbook. So then later on in the macro, you always know if you call active workbook, that will be the workbook that you started from. So you can write lines like the one we've got here. So it says, okay, well, I know the workbook that I'm looking at, which is this one that I've been working on for the last few videos, which is just AR template 1. Sheets unhidden, cells 5-3, value at Adam. So I know exactly where I'm punching to. That's if I know, I can be sure that the name of the workbook won't change, but that might not be the case. So instead I can use this starting sheet, which we've set at the beginning of running the macro. So starting sheet dot cells 5-3 value equals Adam. That's much more secure. Or if we know that we're going to be running, we want to punch this data into the spreadsheet, the workbook, in fact, that the macro is written in, we can use this workbook command, or this workbook value, and punch it into there. We also mentioned about what happens if we add a column, or one of the users adds a column or rows, for instance. Well, then we can do that in a slightly different way. I found it much easier actually to name the column while I'm working in Excel rather than get the macro to name the column. You can get VBA to do that quite easily. I just find it easier to do it actually in Excel. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So to name a column, and perhaps we want to move this button out of the way. Perhaps you want to name this column C, so that we always know that we can come back to this column and punch into that value. Perhaps this column is going to be a column full of names, and we want to be sure that when we punch into our cell that we always get the right column. So we're going to name it. So it's very easy. Just select the whole column, go up to here and give it a name. So this will be the name column. It has to be all one word, and when you finish typing, just hit enter, and then you've got your name. If you make a mistake or you want to change those things, you can do it by managing your names, which is here, and I'll let you explore how you do that. And one last thing that you can also do is you can be polite to your user and return them back to the starting place where they started, where they launched the macro from. So all you have to do then is use this variable starting sheet and to select it.